From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now! We're on the road in Denver, Colorado. Senator John McCain heads to Colombia today, where he's expected to receive a lavish welcome from the Colombian president. We'll speak with a Colombian senator, Piedad Córdoba, who received a far different reception when she came to the United States. She was detained by immigration authorities at JFK Airport. Then dozens of Minutemen confront day laborers gathered for work in Arar, Colorado. While the media focuses on offshore drilling, we'll look at oil and gas drilling on public land here in the United States. But first, fighting continues in northwest Pakistan. We'll speak with journalist and author David Barsamian. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A top United Nations human rights official has said the U.S. military tribunals at Guantanamo are flawed and fall far short of international standards for fair trials. Philip Alston, a special rapporteur of the UN Human Rights Council, also called on the U.S. to open its files on the 5 prisoners who died in custody at Guantanamo. 4 are said to have committed suicide, but their autopsies have never been released. President Bush has signed into law a $162 billion war funding bill passed by the Democratic-led Congress. The bill provides enough funding for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to last well into 2009.
I appreciate that Republicans and Democrats in Congress agreed to provide these vital funds without tying the hands of our commanders and without an artificial timetable of withdrawal from Iraq.
Also includes increased educational benefits for veterans. The Pentagon has announced it'll send 6 additional combat units totaling some 33,000 soldiers and Marines to Iraq in early 2009. Officials said the units would replace troops currently serving in Iraq. This will allow the U.S. to keep over 140,000 U.S. troops in Iraq until the end of President Bush's term. In other Iraq news, the U.S. military has confirmed it carried out a deadly raid in Janaha, the hometown of Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. One of Maliki's cousins was killed in the raid. The man, Ali Abdul Hussein al-Maliki, served as a bodyguard for the Prime Minister's sister. The U.S. raid occurred in Karbala province, one of 9 provinces ostensibly under full Iraqi control. But Iraqi authorities told McClatchy newspapers the raid was conducted without their knowledge or coordination. Iraq threw open the world's 3rd largest oil reserves to foreign firms on Monday, putting U.S. and British companies in a position to return to Iraq for the first time since Saddam Hussein nationalized Iraq's oil over 3 decades ago. Iraqi oil minister Hussein al-Shahrastani listed 8 oil and gas field areas open to foreign firms for long-term development contracts.
Through these initial offers, we hope to increase production of these oil fields to about 1.5 million barrels per day. In addition to current production, which is 2.5 million barrels per day. The ministry...
Or did I come in too soon? The Iraqi government has already pre-qualified 41 foreign firms to bid for the contracts. Iraq postponed the announcement of a series of no-bid contracts that are expected to be given to ExxonMobil, Shell, Total, BP, and Chevron to service Iraq's largest oil fields. 4 Iraqi men are suing U.S. military contractors who they say tortured them while they were detained at Abu Ghraib prison. The company's men named in the suit are Khaki and L3 Services, as well as 3 individual contractors. One of the plaintiffs, an Iraqi farmer, said he was caged, beaten, threatened with dogs, and given electric shocks during more than 4 years in U.S. detention. The Iraqi farmer was released in March without being charged and without any judicial process. A federal appeals court has dismissed a lawsuit filed by Maher Arar, the Syrian-born Canadian citizen who was seized by U.S. officials at Kennedy Airport in New York and rendered to Syria, where he was tortured, interrogated, and detained in a tiny underground cell for nearly a year. The appeals court ruled Arar was never technically inside the United States, so his claims could not be heard in federal courts. Judge Robert Sack issued a scathing dissent and said the argument that Arar was never in the United States was a quote, legal fiction. In a statement, Arar described the court's decision as outrageous. He said, quote, it basically legitimizes what was done to me and permits the government to use immigration law as a disguise to send people to torture without regard for due process. A former CIA operative has accused the CIA of deliberately suppressing evidence that showed Iran had suspected work on developing nuclear weapons. In a motion filed in federal court, the one-time undercover agent asked the government to declassify documents related to Iran's nuclear program. Before his firing in 2004, the former operative says he was repeatedly ordered to either falsify his reporting on WMDs in the Middle East or not to file his reports at all. For the second month in a row, more international troops have died in Afghanistan than in Iraq. 44 U.S. and allied troops died in June in Afghanistan, 14 more than died in Iraq. In campaign news, a new report is estimating Republican presidential candidate John McCain's proposed tax plan will produce a windfall for corporate America. The Center for American Progress estimates McCain's plan would save corporations $175 billion per year. The country's largest 200 corporations alone would save $45 billion. More information has been revealed about Denver's plans to control protesters during the Democratic National Convention in August. Local and federal officials are setting up a so-called public demonstration zone. They plan to fence off with chicken wire or chain link. The American Civil Liberties Union has criticized the plan, comparing it to the setup in Boston during the DNC in 2004 when the protest zone was inside a cage. In environmental news, 13 activists were arrested Monday as they blockaded the offices of Dominion Power in Richmond, Virginia, to protest the company's decision to build a new coal-fired power plant in Virginia. The group, Blue Ridge Earth First, said it would continue to protest at Dominion until the company cancels plans to build the coal plant and stops burning coal mined through mountaintop removal. In news from California, a state commission says California's administration of the death penalty is dysfunctional and close to collapse. The panel concluded the state could save more than $100 million a year if the state replaced the death penalty with sentences of life in prison without possibility of parole. And in Maryland, the state's medical examiner's office has concluded a 19-year-old man was strangled to death while in solitary confinement in a Prince George's County jail. A preliminary autopsy concluded Ronnie White died of asphyxiation. 2 small bones were broken in his neck. White died 2 days after he was arrested and charged with murdering a police officer. The FBI has begun a civil rights probe. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.